Right, welcome back to Morning Express. This is Week in Review and a quick reintroduction of the guests that we have here this morning as we look at some of the happenings that took place over the week. To my extreme left, we have Kefa Ojijo, we have Tuta Richard, and Kilu Delano. Now, one of the things that, of course, we are focusing on is also the situation that we are in Kenya. We currently have petitions before the Supreme Court that are contesting the election of President Uhuru Kenyatta as president-elect. But we also have the opposition leader Raila Odinga, who was out of the country. And one of the statements that he made is in regards to what is required for Kenya right now. What is the right medicine that is required for Kenya right now? Let's listen to what he had to say.
What we are calling for requires a longer time. And in the meantime, we need to have an interim arrangement of governance, which will involve representatives from both parties. We think that maybe 6 months would be required to carry out all these changes that we need in this country in order to have a proper, free and fair election. In this repeat poll, they got less than 30% of the electorate voted for him. That is a vote of no confidence. See? So he will be a president for some part of the country. If they are ready for serious discussions, we will be ready. If they want to protract it, to be very protracted. What I want to assure them is that we will not surrender. Our movement will continue until we achieve what we want.
All right, let me start with you, Kefa. From a legal perspective, we have what Raila refers to as a caretaker government. It is not in the Constitution. However, we also have the issue of the voter turnout and the fact that there is legality and legitimacy. Are we trying to solve a political problem using illegal means that may not be effective?
This is both political and legal.
But one would have to weigh over the other, because at the end of the day, yes, it is political and legal, but we have one side pulling with the legal narrative that there is nothing like a caretaker government within the confines of the Constitution. But we have the other side saying that because this is an illegitimate government, then we have to have an arrangement, as it were, that is outside of the Constitution that helps us midwife or caretake until now we have legitimacy that is agreed by all and sundry.
Gitonga, one thing you want to do as a leader who leads a nation is you don't want to lead a divided nation. You want to lead a nation that moves with you and help you pull in the right direction. Now, one of the principles in political and governance is called the social contract, where people donate their own power to a certain institution called the government. Now, if they feel this government is not performing, they have two duties. One, to constantly insist that the power they donated are used in that purpose. And if that fails, then under Article 1, they withdraw it and start exercising their own way. Now, what Raila is saying, if I got him clearly, Raila says that let us have an interim, government that works. This has worked even in South Africa. You see, this also can trickle down to Article 139 of the Constitution. You see, what Article 139 of the Constitution has been given a wider, interpretation in Raila Odinga 2013 case to include not only the death of the president, you see, other factors that can incapacitate government from performing. Now, what are they saying? They're saying that we saw what happened, the aftermath of the 26th election, which others think was not election. The reality was, you can read the mood of Kenyans. People are divided. Even those who turned out, even from the Jubilee stronghold, the supporters, the turnout of their supporters was not as expected, you see. So it is a clear show that which way do we need to go? But this has been a problem with Africans, not only Kenyans. You see, the electoral process has always has always been a system that makes people, divided even most after elections, over again. So I think the first issue we need to deal with is to ensure that we come up with a proper electoral system, that then these people can have a fair contest where people feel they elect a leader of their own.
Even if it means that we go outside the walls of the Constitution, because according to some, they have said that is uncharted grounds to a point where we don't know how far that can go. Because once you step out of the Constitution, now you're in no man's land, as it were.
Gitonga, those who are telling you you're going out of the Constitution do not understand the law. I can tell you.
So there's something within the Constitution that talks about a caretaker government?
You see, it's not how they put the caretaker government, you see, but there's so many articles. If you read Article 139, if you look at the transition from Article 259.9 going onwards, it gives even the organs, they call the powers, to ensure that there is a state of interim, there is a state that steps in to help the government in case that government incapacitated.
So where in the Constitution would we have this provision for what is now being called a caretaker government? Maybe there's a constitutional term that it has that you could enlighten us on.
If you look at Article 159.3, it says that in the absence of the president or in the deputy president, the Speaker of the National Assembly may step in.
So are we saying,
that is number one.
Are you saying that?
Now, that is what the Constitution.
Okay.
Now, this has been given a wider interpretation. You know, the judiciary has a mandate to interpret articles further. Constitution are not read like a book or like an act of parliament where it says this and that's it. It is read in a wider depth, what we call a jus dim generis in law. Other things that may be similar to that, what may incapacitate the government. But Raila says that will be one option. The second option will be the agreement between both parties, because this is political. That will be the first legal issue. The second option you can opt for is political. Remember, even after the 2007, 2008, when we had the post-election violence, we did not, the then constitution did not provide for the office of the prime minister. But because it was a political issue that wanted to unite the nation, they came up with the National Accord.
Okay. Allow me to bring Tuta in here. And Tuta, he's brought in something which Kenya now refers to as Nusumkate government, when we had the Prime Minister come in. And these are, of course, uniquely Kenyan terms because nobody else would understand what a half-loaf government is. But is that what we are talking about when Raila refers to a caretaker government? Is he talking about a negotiated process, which is political, where there is almost an agreement, as it were, of power sharing, which hopefully would see us now to what is being termed as credible election?
Gitonga, one thing that we need to ask ourselves first is that, do we have a problem as a country, first of all? Because to some people is that we don't have a problem. To others is that we have a problem. Can both two parties, that which believes that there is a problem, convince the other also to realize that there is a problem? So that now we can move to the next stage and to ask ourselves, what nature of a problem? Is it a legal problem? Is it a political problem? Or is it a religious problem? In order for us now to find out a prescription. So that, because the most undoing for this country is when we will come up with a prescription that thinking that we have a legal problem, whereas what we have is a political problem. So as it is currently, if the problem is a political one, then we need to come up with a political solution. And amongst the political solution that may be looked at is what maybe has been put on the table by the Prime Minister, former Prime Minister. But what it's required is, can he convince the others through using legal means that yes, we have a problem, this problem is political, and among the prescriptions that need to be given in order to give a remedy to this problem is what you have referred to, and what Kenyans are used to is a nusumkate. Right. Then let somebody else also give his angle of the solution.
Okay.
Yes.
I think, Mike, our biggest failure as a nation, we are juxtaposed. We have failed in cross-generational thinking. We've come to this place where it has to be an absolute state, and where it has to be an absolute state of either we are in charge or they are in charge, and that cannot work for children. 50 years from today, Mike, who of these leaders will still be around, will still be feeding the children of this nation? And will those children be proud of the legacy that we have left them? I feel in this nation, one big thing that is called honor has left the building. And that is why we have this mistrust. Because if you listen to what Tuta and Advocate Kefa have said, all of it boils down to the issue of trust. We are doing this because we don't trust you. And we have to restore the foundational building blocks, not only of the nation, but as Tuta has said, we have to address the real problem and get to the real root cause and deal with it in order for us to move on. Now, again, we're looking for, if I look at it, there are three things that are currently challenging this nation. One is there's a call for changes in terms of laws, and especially starting at the county level, to change the way that this nation thinks, feels, and behaves and reacts. Two, there is now a serious spearheaded attack against the private sector to bring an economic downfall to particular private sector corporations, which are seen as leaning to another side. What does that say? It just simply says, I don't trust you. And I'm telling everybody else not to trust you. And number three, at the end of it all, there's also a call for, let's disarrange the way the nation works. All these things have consequences because, you see, Kenya is not an island to itself. The world has become a global village. Every single thing that we do and say has an impact, not only on us as a country, but in terms of regional security. I'm telling you, we are putting big things at risk in terms of regional security. Kenya has been the centerpiece. It has been the pinnacle of security for this entire region. When we start talking about dismantling this nation into secession, we have been addressing security issues in Congo, Burundi, issues in Rwanda prior to all the stability that came into Rwanda at that particular stage. We've been addressing issues even in Uganda as far back as the 1980s. We've been addressing issues in Sudan, South Sudan. We've been addressing issues, as far away as places like Darfur in Sudan. We've been addressing issues in Somalia and in Somaliland. And now, all of a sudden, we say, now we want to just let the cookie crumble. What happens is we do what we call in security, what-if analysis. And when we do a what-if analysis, you'll say, yes, you will win. Let me give you a very good example. In the case of the Supreme Court case, and I'm not saying that that was wrong. There was a huge victory. I'm telling you, there was a very big victory. And you could do and see so many people celebrated that particular victory. Yet, that was a temporary victory, because the same people who celebrated that particular victory are now extremely unhappy once again. So when we look at these things from an absolute, we could go into all these directions, but will those directions actually satisfy the root cause? Because 2-3 years down the line, when we analyze, are we better now, or is it going to be a case like where the children of Israel left Egypt, going to the promised land, and then started crying for onions of Egypt? Let's not say, let's move in this direction and assume that everything is going to be well. Let's understand all the what-if analysis. Right now, in fact, our enemies of this nation are rubbing their hands in gleeful delight, saying, let it crumble a little more so that we can actually get in. If we're not wrong, although we cannot disclose everything, there are people who have been against this nation. You recall 2013 and onwards, there are so many attacks against this nation that have been stopped. And I don't think that we can say, ideally, that this nation is not working. There are many areas. In the area of security, I'm telling you, this nation is working. It's ticking like a sewing machine.
All right. So I need us to somehow land this aircraft because of time. And let me start with you, Tuta, and possibly anchor in on that, the what-if question and where we should be as a country. Some of the things we are doing now may look very, maybe a growth in democracy, so to speak, but could affect us 10 years from now. Either way, it can affect us negatively or positively. But your closing comments as we look and project what we should expect in the next few days.
I think one thing, based on what he has said, is that as a country now, those who are entrusted with the responsibility of managing the affairs of this country as it is currently need to, when they embrace the what if thinking, they need now to start seeing beyond the headlamp. both they should imagine likelihood scenarios that we may find ourselves as a country moving forward, and to come up with the measures to respond to all those real and imagined what-if scenarios that is ahead of us. But you must also realize that there are various ways by which somebody can become a prince, according to Machiavelli. One of the ways is that you can also become a leader through crime. You can decide that today, and becoming a leader through crime is, for instance, even military coup, things like that. You can decide. You can also become a leader through hereditary, whereby you inherit from your forefather, like, for instance, what happens in the kingdom. You can also become a leader through a constitutional principality, like, for instance, the recent held elections. But what is important, which might become challenging for whoever becomes a leader in any of the three ways, is how he takes over and moves forward.
All right.
You can become a leader through crime, but you end up being one of the best leaders. But you can also become a leader through a constitutional principality, and you prove to be the worst leader in the history of this world.
Kefa, your closing comments.
Gichonga, allow me to say this, that there are two issues here that the parties can address. We can either choose to go legal or political. But as an advocate and a constitutional lawyer who even participated in the petitions, I can tell you that legal measures include one side winning and the other side losing. Political measures will include a win-win for both parties. Now, what does Kenya need right now? A gentleman called Kriegler did a very good job for this country. And he actually realized why Kenyans will always fight after every 5 years. He raised all those concerns and provided long-term in agenda number 5. But the most important issue that he raised must be resolved is the electoral question for this country. Kenyans feel that over 5 decades now, we have failed through transformation, through the process of electing our leaders. And Kenyans want a situation that your son, my son in the near future, can vie for any position and their votes will count just as any other person. Kenyans are now insisting for simple things. Let us have a credible, transparent, free and fair election where the winner wins, the loser loses with a smile. And if there is any way, whether it is political or legal, that can bring this system to work, it ought to be embraced. Because remember, laws are made by people for them to govern them. People can still choose to do away the laws that do not work for them and put in place laws that work for them. That is how laws are made. People are not made for laws. Laws are made for people themselves.
All right. Kilu, your closing comments. Very briefly, we're out of time.
Mike, the issues here are very clear. And you've heard the common thread here is the Constitution at the end of the day. And the Constitution has to work for the Kenyans at the end of the day. And prior to this Constitution being promulgated, there were at least 3 changes made which actually, in my humble opinion, really diluted the effect of the Constitution, which is why we have so many challenges when now an election period has come up. At the end of the day, it's all about leadership. And really, for my closing, I call upon the leaders in this nation to consider the future, to consider the challenges, but to consider the future, to consider the implications of decisions that are made based on an emotion that will require great changes to come, not only in your life, but in the lives of the people who you lead. And really, I'm calling upon leaders to look into this in a different way and to really open up their hearts to decide whether this is the key decision that you are put in this place and at this time to execute on. From a security standpoint, think not only about your children, but think about the children of this nation, think about the vulnerable people, and really, before you make any decision or any calls or any major directions, think about the future.
Thank you, gentlemen. We'll have to wind it up right there. That's Kefa Ojijo, Tuta Richard, and Kilu Delano. That is, well, the week in review and what it has been. So for now, we're going to take a